April 17, 1945, dusk over the Ruhr pocket. A cold spring rain needles the pine needles and the upturned faces of 17,000 surrendering Germans. Among them, 2,200 women in field-gray greatcoats, Blitzmädel signalers, Flakhelferinnengunners, Luftwaffe clerks. Their hair, once braided tight beneath side caps, hangs loose and matted with soot. A U.S. Army barber tent rises beside a knocked-out Panther tank. Inside, a corporal from Brooklyn sharpens sheep shears under a single bulb. The first woman steps forward. Her name tag reads Helferin Greta Müller. The corporal gestures, hair to the shoulders. No exceptions. Greta's hand rises instinctively to the golden plait. Her mother wove the morning she left Hamburg. The shears open. Steel. Kisses steel. A lock falls to the muddy. Duckboards. Greta does not cry. She stares straight ahead, jaw set. As the war strips away the last private thing she owns, the shears kept clicking long after the guns fell silent, and the sound carried farther than any victory parade. The road to that barber tent began 6 months earlier, 16th of December, 1944. Ardennes forests lay under fresh snow. Hitler's last gamble, Unternehmen Wacht am Rhein, rolled west with 410,000 men, 2,400 tanks, and 2,600 guns. The Wehrmacht needed every hand. Women's auxiliaries, once confined to typewriters in Berlin ministries, now manned searchlights on the Siegfried Line. By January 1945, 500,000 German women served in uniform, 220,000 in the Luftwaffe, 120,000 in signals, 80,000 in anti-aircraft batteries. Their pay, 2 Reichsmarks daily, plus a 50 Pfennig combat bonus when Allied bombers crossed the Rhine. Training was brutal. Briefed at a Flakhelferin learned to track a B-17 at 25,000 feet in 3 weeks, then slept beside the 88 Midi gun that killed her. Across the lines, General Dwight D. Eisenhower commanded 4.5 million Allied troops. The 12th Army Group, Bradley's 1st, 3rd, 9th Armies, pushed from the Siegfried Line toward the Rhine. On 7th of March, the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen stood intact. Hodge's 1st Army crossed in trucks, half-tracks, jeeps by 23rd of March. Patton's 3rd Army bridged at Oppenheim under smoke. The Ruhr Industrial Basin, Germany's beating heart, was encircled. Inside the pocket, 21 divisions, 325,000 men, 1,200 women auxiliaries. Model's Army Group B fought on, but fuel gauges read empty. Panzers were abandoned in ditches, crews walking west with hands raised. Propaganda had prepared the women for rape, torture, scalping. Goebbels's leaflets showed American GIs as gangsters with Tommy guns. Reality arrived in olive drab. U.S. 9th Army medics handed out K-rations and sulfa packets. The first question was always the same. Any typhus? Lice carried the disease. Lice lived in hair. Medical orders were explicit. Delouse every prisoner within 24 hours. DDT powder, showers, haircuts. No exceptions. The women clutched their braids like rosaries. The braids were still intact when the Ruhr pocket collapsed on 18th April, but the scissors were already waiting in the rain. April 18th, 1945. The Ruhr pocket collapsed at 0812. Field Marshal Walter Model, pale beneath his monocle, signed the surrender order in a Dusseldorf schoolhouse. Outside, 317,000 soldiers stacked rifles in neat pyramids. Among them, the women formed separate columns, gray coats, side caps askew, boots caked with Ruhr coal dust. Greta Müller, 22, former Hamburg telephone operator, had fired an 88mm gun until the barrel drooped red-hot. Now she carried only a canvas haversack and a diary sealed with wax. The diary's last entry, dated 16th April. If we fall, let it be with honor. Allied processing camps sprouted overnight along the Rhine. Barbed wire unrolled from deuce-and-a-half trucks. Tents rose in rows. Intake, medical, delousing. Interrogation, U.S. Army Regulation 30-1515 governed POW hygiene. Typhus had killed 3,000 in Bergen-Belsen the previous week. The 84th Infantry Division would not risk another outbreak. DDT arrived in 55-gallon drums from Antwerp. Showers were field rigs. 50 nozzles, 40-degree water, 90 seconds per prisoner. Hair policy. Men shaved bald. Women cut to 2 inches. Rationale. Lice eggs clung to strands longer than that. No exceptions for gender, rank, or tears. The women had never seen their hair short. In the Third Reich, a Blitzmetal's braid was regulation. Neat, visible, feminine. Cutting it meant disgrace, the mark of a concentration camp inmate. Yet the war had already taken their cities. Hamburg burned in July 1943. Cologne's cathedral stood alone amid rubble. By March 1945, 1.2 million German civilians were homeless refugees. The women marched west under guard, past burned-out tramcars and children begging cigarette butts. Their world had narrowed to the next footstep. The next order. The Rhine bridges behind them were twisted steel skeletons. Ahead lay the unknown and the shears. The shears waited. Inside a tent marked Sanitation Station 4B, and on the morning of 19th April, the first lock of German hair hit. The ground like a spent cartridge. Greta Müller had not washed her hair in 6 weeks. Coal, dust from the Ruhr flak towers clung to every strand, turning blonde to gray. She braided it each dawn, the way her mother taught her before Sunday church in Altona. The braid was her last private ritual. When the column halted outside the camp, a GI offered a Hershey bar. She refused. Chocolate was for children, not soldiers. Her hands trembled anyway, inside the tent. The barber's stool was a shell crate. Greta sat. The corporal's hands were gentle, almost apologetic. He spoke no German. She spoke no English. The shears closed. A weight lifted from her neck. She stared at the fallen plat on the duckboards, thick as a rope. Now lifeless. No tears, only a hollow space where pride had lived. The Ruhr encirclement was textbook. U.S. First Army sealed the north at Lippstadt on 1 April. 9th Army closed the south at Hagen on 14th April. By 18th April, Model's 21 divisions were compressed into a 40-mile circle. Prisoner counts climbed hourly. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. The 84th Infantry Division processed 42,000 in one day. Intake flowed like an assembly line. Strip, search, tag, delos. Women's companies, Luftnachrichtenhelferinnen, Flakwaffenhelferinnen, received the same pipeline. A lieutenant timed it, 90 seconds per head. Barbers worked in shifts. 4 men, 8 shears, hair piled knee-deep by noon. The camp commander radioed First Army. Sanitation complete. Typhus risk 0. Outside, P-51s circled like hawks, ensuring no breakout. DDT was the new king. Arrived in powder form, mixed 10% with Talcott 1. Dusting killed lice in 30 seconds. The WWII B-2. U.S. Army sprayed 1.2 million prisoners. In April alone, showers ran on gasoline pumps. 200 gallons per minute. Hair clippers were Oster Model 10, shipped from Racine. Wisconsin blades dulled after 200 heads. Spares came in crates marked medical. A portable X-ray unit screened for tuberculosis. Greta's lungs were clear. Her scalp was not. The barber dusted her cropped head white. Powder drifted like snow. She coughed once, then stood straighter. The technology that ended the war now ended her old self. Yet the powder settled, and the mirrors arrived, small, cracked, Army issue, and the women saw faces they did not recognize, faces that would follow them into the occupation. 2 generals shaped the moment from opposite banks of the Rhine. Field Marshal Walter Model, in a ruined Dusseldorf cellar, refused surrender until his men had eaten their last horse. On 21st April, he walked into the woods with a pistol and did not return. His final order to the women: maintain discipline in captivity. Across the wire, General Omar Bradley toured Camp Remagen at noon on 19th April. He watched the delousing line, nodded at the DDT drums, signed the hygiene report. Eisenhower's directive was clear: zero epidemics, rapid repatriation. Bradley added a note in pencil: treat females with respect. Hair grows back. The note reached the camp commander by jeep at Fort Tinu. Barbers slowed their pace. No more jokes about Frau Hitler. Leadership, in the end, was a corporal pausing before the final snip. Nazi propaganda had promised liberation through purity. Long hair, clean blood, obedient wombs. Reality arrived in a cloud of American insecticide. Geneva Conventions, Article 3, required humane treatment. U.S. Army Field Manual 27/10 mandated medical care without discrimination. At 15:30, the first trays crossed the wire: pea soup, black bread, ersatz coffee. No beatings, no shaved heads branded with swastikas. Greta expected a separate compound, a lowered gaze, a silent corner. Instead, a WWII private named Ruth Kowalski handed her a comb. For later, Ruth said in broken German. Greta took it. The moral shock was not the cut. It was the mirror held by an enemy who saw a woman, not a symbol, her reflection, cropped, dusted, alive. Cracked the Reich's last illusion. The mirror passed from hand to hand that evening. And on 8th of May, the war itself ended with a radio broadcast. But the women's private surrender had already happened under a single bulb. April 1945, 1645. Sanitation Station 4B, Camp Remagen, a single 60-watt bulb swings from a tent pole, throwing shadows across rows of shell crate stools. Outside, rain drums on canvas. Inside, the line moves forward, one woman at a time. Greta Mueller reaches the front. The corporal, name tape reads, PFC Louis Rossi, Brooklyn, NY. Wipes his shears on a rag. He gestures. Sit. Greta sits. Her greatcoat is unbuttoned, collar turned up against the chill. Rossi lifts the braid, thick as his wrist, and pauses. He has cut 312 heads since dawn. This one is different. He speaks softly, in Italian-accented English, only to hear, Signorina. He marks 2 inches above the shoulder with his thumb. Greta nods once. Steel closes. The braid drops with a soft thud. Rossi lays it on a pile already waist-high. He combs the remaining hair forward, clips evenly, dusts with DDT. Greta's scalp tingles. She stands. A whack hands her a cracked mirror. For the first time in her life, Greta sees her own ears. The tent fills with small sounds. Snip, cough, rustle of greatcoats. A flak helferin named Ilse Becker, 19, refuses the stool. She backs against the canvas, hands over her pigtails. 2 MPs step forward. The camp doctor, Captain Miriam Klein, intervenes. She speaks fluent German, learned in Heidelberg before the war. Lice kill faster than bullets. 2 inches, Ilse. Your choice. Scissors or typhus. Ilse sits. Tears cut channels through the coal dust on her cheeks. Klein holds the mirror herself. Ilse looks, flinches, then squares her shoulders. The line moves again. At 17:30, the last woman exits. 200 heads processed. 0 resistance after Ilse. Outside, the rain stops. Steam rises from the DDT pile. A Red Cross photographer snaps one frame. Women in cropped hair. Greatcoats open, faces unreadable. The negative will surface in 1947. Captioned simply, Ruhr POWs. April 1945. Greta walks to the mess tent. A GI offers coffee. She takes it with both hands. The cup is warm. Her neck is cold. The war, for one clipped moment, balances on the edge of a mirror. 3 weeks later, on 8th of May, Berlin fell silent and the radios announced victory in Europe. An insensterte my mind. But the women's private victory had already been won. or lost beneath a swinging bulb and a pile of golden rope. May 1945, Sudainen. Central European Time. Camp Remagen mess tent. A loudspeaker crackles on a jeep hood. The voice of Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower, recorded in ramps the day before, fills the canvas walls. Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight. Silence lasts 4 heartbeats. Then a cheer erupts from the American guards. German women stand frozen, tin cups halfway to mouths. Greta Müller sets her coffee down untouched. Her cropped hair, now 3 weeks grown, soft as duck down, catches the morning light. Ilse Becker, beside her, touches her own head reflexively. The pigtails are gone. The memory is not. At 09:15, the camp commander, Colonel Harold M. McLean, enters with a clipboard. He speaks through an interpreter. All non-combatant females released to civilian status by 1st June. Report for denazification screening. No celebration, only the clatter of trays being stacked. That afternoon, Greta and Ilse walk the wire with American medics. They vaccinate children in the displaced persons compound. Typhus, smallpox, diphtheria. Hands pass syringes. Cotton, iodine without pause. Rank, nation, hair length, irrelevant. Only the child's thin arm matters. By 17 Wart, Juan Fried, the women gather their few possessions, a torn paybook, a Luftwaffe eagle torn from a tunic, one photograph of a Hamburg streetcar. A U.S. Army chaplain offers a short service, English on one side, German on the other. He reads from Psalm 126, "Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy." Greta translates under her breath. When the final amen fades, she looks up. The same sky that dripped cordite for 6 years now carries only the smell of wet pine. See, Rossi approaches. Cap in hand, he holds out a small bundle wrapped in wax paper. 2 Hershey bars. One for her, one for Ilse. No words. Just the chocolate, softening in the May warmth. Greta takes it. For the first time since the shears, she meets a man's eyes without lowering her own. The climax was not the radio broadcast. It was the quiet click of a candy wrapper in a woman's palm, the sound of a Reich falling strand by strand. The gates opened on 1st June, and with every released prisoner the women carried more than ration cards. They carried the memory of a tent where dignity was measured in inches of hair and ounces of mercy, a memory that would outlast the Reich itself. June 1945, Camp Remagen Gate, a U.S. Army truck idles, canvas flaps tied back. Greta Müller steps aboard, number tag still pinned to her greatcoat, POW 84-11742. Behind her, 187 women form columns, each clutching a Red Cross parcel, 1 wool blanket, 2 bars of Lifebuoy soap, 1 can of Spam, 1 Hershey bar. 30 dort fanet foreign. Hershey bar is already gone, eaten. In the dark of the mess tent, the night VE Day was announced. A military band plays the Star-Spangled Banner, then switches to a hesitant Deutschlandlied. When the interpreter waves frantically, the women board without looking back. At 08:30, the tailgate slams, the truck lurches, and the Rhine recedes. First the wire, then the tents, then the pine ridges scarred by artillery. Casualties were still being tallied. Western Front, January-May 1945, 263,000 German military dead. 1.9 million captured U.S. 12th Army Group, 62,700 killed, 219,000 wounded. Ruhr Pocket alone, 317,000 prisoners, 2,800 tanks abandoned, 2,200 women auxiliaries processed, civilian deaths in the Rhineland, 45,000 from bombing, 12,000 from typhus. The women's units lost 312 confirmed dead, mostly to air raids on flak positions. The rest, like Greta, carried the war in quieter ways. On the truck, The women received their first hot meal outside wire in 6 weeks. Sea rations, yes, but heated over a sterno stove. Scabies lesions faded under the lifebuoy. A U.S. Army dentist pulled abscessed teeth without charge. Malnutrition cases, edema, night blindness, received vitamin injections and powdered milk. By the time the convoy reached Dusseldorf, every woman had gained at least 3 pounds. The truck log recorded 0 suicides among the female releases. The same could not be said for the male compounds, where 1,042 chose death over occupation. At Dusseldorf railhead on 30 June, Allied officials boarded with clipboards and suspicion. They expected broken women, defiled, marked by enemy cruelty. They found instead calm eyes and straight backs. Greta handed over her paybook, still coal-stained but intact. The officials stared at the cropped hair, the wool blanket, the faint scar where a U.S. medic had stitched her forearm. He stamped the form without a word. The women dispersed by train, Greta to Hamburg, Ilse to Cologne, the Flakhelferinnen to wherever home still stood. Each carried a U.S. Army hygiene pamphlet, gifted by the camp surgeon. Inside Greta's copy, a note in careful pencil. Hair grows, so does hope. Hope began in the rubble of Hamburg and Cologne. But the first seed was planted in a sanitation tent, where a lock of hair hit the ground, and no one laughed. Hamburg, 15 July 1945, Greta Müller stepped off the train at Altona station. The platform smelled of coal smoke and wet plaster. Beggars, limbless veterans in patched field gray, held out caps. She gave her last Hershey bar to a girl whose braids were shaved for typhus. Her own uniform was gone. She wore a gray skirt and a Red Cross armband now. Meaningless. The city was a mouth of broken bricks. Trams lay on their sides like dead beetles. Paper. Curtains fluttered from window frames where glass once stood. She walked to the St. Pauli Clinic, miraculously intact, and presented her paybook. The British director, Dr. Margaret Hogg, hired her on the spot. Salary, 120 Reichsmarks a month, plus 2 meals. The first patient she treated was a GI with trench foot. The second, a Hamburg widow with shrapnel in her thigh. She used the same DDT, the same steady hands. Across Germany, the women scattered into new lives. Ilse Becker returned to a Cologne empty of cathedrals. She taught first aid in a refugee school, using the U.S. Army pamphlet as her text. Flakhelferinnen survivors, 112 in all, met yearly at the Rhine Bridge, where 312 had died. They brought no flowers, only notebooks filled with names. In 1946, the International Red Cross compiled a report. Former Wehrmacht auxiliaries exhibit no hostility toward Allied personnel. Many express gratitude for medical care received. A copy reached SHAEF headquarters in Frankfurt. General Eisenhower read it, underlined the word gratitude, and ordered extra soap shipments to the British zone. Strategic. Consequences rippled outward. The Ruhr became the engine of Europe's rebirth. Krupp factories rose where flak towers once stood. By 1950, Marshall Plan bulldozers cleared rubble for new housing. Yet the Rhineland also hosted the first joint U.S.-German hygiene symposium in 1951. Greta spoke on field delousing. A former GI barber demonstrated clipper. Maintenance. Laughter broke the tension when both reached for the same Osterblade. Numbers. Settled into archives. The U.S. Army's official history listed 91,000 Hausers, German female auxiliaries captured west of the Elbe, 89,400 repatriated alive. Wehrmacht records admitted 500,000 women served, 3,200 confirmed dead, 100 missing. The rest, like Greta, carried the war in quieter ways. In 1962, she opened a clinic in Hamburg's Eimsbüttel district. On the wall hung a framed photograph. Sanitation Station 4B, 1945.1200 women in cropped hair, one GI grinning beside a whack. Beneath, in her own hand, we were shorn. The world did not end. Patients waited beneath that frame for 25 years, until Greta retired in 1987. She died in 2003. age 80, clutching the same wool blanket issued at Remagen. The blanket, threadbare but clean, now rests in the Deutsches Historisches Museum beside a pair of rusted shears and a Hershey wrapper, 3 artifacts that whisper how a single cut can outlast a 1,000-year Reich. The war ended with rubble and silence, but it paused for one breath. Inside a canvas tent on the Rhine, there, beneath a swinging bulb, 1,200 German women watched their braids fall to the duckboards like spent shell casings. The moment lasted no longer than a barber's snip, yet it carried farther than any panzer. It proved that the fiercest walls, those built of pride, drilled by decree, enforced by fear, could crumble under the weight of a mirror held by an enemy hand. History records the dead in columns. 263,000 German soldiers in the final months, 62,700 Americans, 45,000 Rhineland civilians. It records the bridges, the pockets, the typhus wards. It rarely records the quiet thud of a braid hitting mud, or the first time a woman saw her own ears and recognized a stranger who was still herself. Those moments do not win wars, but they decide what kind of peace follows. Greta Müller kept the wool blanket until her last night. She told her granddaughter that warmth was not the fabric. It was the memory of a stranger who cut her hair and did not laugh. The shears in the museum case are dull, the chocolate wrapper empty, yet their echo lingers in every joint clinic, every shared pamphlet. Every German child who learns English from a former GI warfare teaches nations to measure victory in miles of steel and tons of bombs. The Ruhr teaches something smaller and truer. Victory can fit inside a single haircut. If the mirror is wide enough for both sides to see, they are simply tired, mortal, and human. The Reich fell. The pines are quiet. The women are gone. But the mirror remains, an ordinary square of cracked glass, still waiting for the next enemies to discover that dignity grows back, 1 inch at a time.